Long before the city of Ekunla learned his name, the boy was known only as the one beneath the bridge. Every morning, as the sun rose like a tired orange over the sprawling African metropolis, traffic roared above the old concrete bridge that cut through the heart of the city. Beneath it, hidden from the eyes of hurried office workers and luxury car owners, stood a makeshift shelter built from rusted zinc sheets, torn campaign banners, and pieces of cardboard scavenged from trash heaps. This was where Kanyin lived. Kanyin was 15 years old, though hunger and hardship had carved deeper years into his face. His skin was dark and smooth, like wet earth after rain, but his eyes, those eyes, were old. They carried questions the world had never answered, and secrets he himself did not yet understand. Every night, before sleep claimed him, Kanyin pressed his ear to the ground and listened to the city's heartbeat. His grandmother had taught him that the earth speaks to those who are patient enough to listen. She used to say, "Blood remembers even when the mind forgets." Kanyin did not know what she meant then. He would come to understand too late. His grandmother, Iya Morunke, had been a storyteller, one of the last in their village. She told tales of kings who lost their crowns and beggars who carried royal blood. She taught him proverbs older than the river and songs meant to calm restless spirits. When she died, the world became quieter and far crueler. That was the night Kanyin ran to the city. The shelter beneath the bridge was crowded with other lost children, orphans, runaways, and souls abandoned by fate. Yet even among them, Kanyin stood apart. He did not steal unless hunger clawed too deeply. He did not fight unless provoked. And when the other children laughed at dreams, he stayed silent, because somewhere deep inside him burned a certainty he could not explain. He believed his life was meant for more. On this particular morning, Kanyin woke before dawn. The rain had stopped, but its memory lingered in the air. He folded his thin blanket carefully. His grandmother had taught him that order was a form of dignity, and stepped out to wash his face at a nearby tap. As he bent over the cold water, an image flashed in his mind. A large compound, red earth, tall Aroko trees, a man standing at the center of it all, dressed in white, his face stern yet sorrowful. Kanyin gasped and clutched the edge of the basin. These visions had been coming more frequently, dreams of a life he had never lived, places he had never seen, yet somehow recognized. He dismissed them as hunger-induced fantasies, but the feeling they left behind was too heavy to ignore. Above the bridge, engines slowed. A convoy of black vehicles rolled into the neighborhood, their tinted windows reflecting the broken city around them. People stopped. Traders stared. Even the street hawkers fell silent. Inside the lead vehicle sat Chief Adeyemi Ogunwale, one of the wealthiest men in the nation, an oil magnate, real estate titan, and philanthropist whose name opened doors and silenced rooms. At 72, he had everything money could buy, except peace. That morning, he had insisted on taking a different route. He had told his driver, "I want to see the real city, not the one they show on billboards." As the car slowed near the bridge, Chief Ogunwale's gaze drifted downward. And then he saw the boy. Kanyin stood in the open, sunlight brushing his face, his posture upright despite the rags he wore. For a heartbeat, just one, the billionaire's chest tightened, his breath caught, the world seemed to tilt. The boy's eyes met his. Chief Ogunwale's hand trembled. Those eyes. They were the same eyes that had haunted him for 40 years, the eyes of the son he had lost, the bloodline he believed buried by shame, betrayal, and silence. "Stop the car," the old man whispered. The driver hesitated. "Sir?" "I said stop." The vehicle came to a halt. Below the bridge, unaware that destiny had just slammed its staff against the earth, Kanyin felt a strange pull in his chest, as if an invisible thread had tightened around his heart. He did not know it yet, but this was the moment his story truly began. When Chief Adeyemi Ogunwale stepped out of his car, the city seemed to hold its breath. People whispered his name in awe. Ogunwale, the billionaire, the chief. Cameras did not follow him here, beneath the bridge where the stench of damp concrete and forgotten lives hung thick in the air. This was not a place men like him were meant to walk, yet his polished leather shoes touched the muddy ground without hesitation, as though something older than pride guided his steps. Kanyin froze. Children beneath the bridge scattered instinctively, assuming trouble had arrived. Men with wealth often brought policemen, and policemen often brought pain. But this man came alone, his shoulders heavy with years, his eyes fixed only on Kanyin. "You," the old man said, his voice deep and trembling. "What is your name?" Kanyin swallowed. His grandmother had taught him never to lower his gaze when truth was on his tongue. He stood straight. "My name is Kanyin, sir." The sound of the name struck Chief Adeyemi like a drumbeat from the past. His lips parted, but no words came at first. Instead, a memory rose, clear and merciless. A woman standing at the gate of his father's compound, holding a child in her arms, a child he was forbidden to claim. "What is your full name?" the chief asked softly. Kanyin hesitated. No one had ever cared to ask that question. Kanyin Morunke," he finally said. "That was my grandmother's name." Morunke. The chief staggered a little, steadying himself against the car door. The driver rushed forward, but he waved him away. Morunke had been the name of the woman his son loved, the woman the family rejected, the woman who disappeared into obscurity, carrying a child that the Ogunwale name refused to recognize. "Where is your grandmother now?" the chief asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "She died 2 years ago," Kanyin replied. "She said the ancestors would watch over me." Something inside the old man broke. Chief Ogunwale turned away, pressing his fist against his chest. For decades he had convinced himself that the past was sealed, washed away by money, power, and time. But here it was, standing barefoot beneath a bridge, wearing rags and carrying his blood in its veins. "Come with me," he said suddenly. Kanyin's heart pounded. "Sir? Come with me. I will buy you food. You look hungry." The other children watched in stunned silence as Kanyin followed the stranger into the sleek black car. As the door closed, the city swallowed them both. Inside, Kanyin sat stiffly, afraid to touch anything. The smell of leather and expensive cologne felt foreign, almost unreal. The chief studied him from the corner of his eye, noting the curve of his nose, the set of his jaw, features too familiar to dismiss as a coincidence. They ate at a roadside restaurant. Kanyin devoured the food slowly, savoring each bite as if it might vanish if he rushed. The chief watched him with an ache so deep it bordered on guilt. "What do you want to become?" Chief Ogunwale asked. Kanyin paused. "I want to understand why I am here," he said honestly. "My grandmother said I was born from a story that refused to die." The chief closed his eyes. By the time the convoy drove away, Kanyin did not know he was being taken to a guest house, not a shelter, and Chief Ogunwale did not know whether he had just found salvation or awakened a storm his family had buried for generations. Above them, unseen, the ancestors stirred. The Ogunwale estate stood on the outskirts of Ekunla like a kingdom untouched by time. High walls crowned with carved iron surrounded acres of land where manicured lawns met ancient trees older than the city itself. Within those walls lay a house built not merely of stone and glass, but of secrets, secrets that whispered at night and echoed through its long corridors. Kanyin stepped out of the car and stared. He had never seen a place so vast. The building rose in layers, cream-colored walls glowing softly beneath the evening sky. Tall wooden doors bore intricate carvings of ancestral symbols, symbols his grandmother had once drawn in the dirt as she told stories by firelight. His chest tightened.
A young man stood beside a woman with gentle eyes and a radiant smile. The man's hand rested protectively on her shoulder. Though decades had passed since the picture was taken, Kanyin felt an undeniable pull. "That is my son," Chief Ogunwale said behind him. His name was Olumide. Kenyon's throat tightened. "He looks like me." "Yes," the chief replied. "He does." That night, Kanyin was given a room larger than the entire shelter beneath the bridge. The bed was soft, the sheets clean, the silence overwhelming. Sleep did not come easily. When it finally did, it brought fire. He dreamed of Olumide, standing in the rain, arguing with his father, refusing to abandon the woman he loved. He dreamed of Morunke walking away from the compound, her back straight, her tears hidden. He dreamed of a child born under a full moon, marked by destiny and forgotten by name. Kanyin woke up screaming. Chief Ogunwale arrived at his door moments later, breathless. "You saw him," the old man said, not as a question, but a knowing. "Yes," Kanyin whispered. "He said the truth cannot stay buried." The chief sank into a chair, his face lined with regret. At dawn, he summoned his lawyers, his doctor, and his estranged daughter. Because if Kanyin truly was who the ancestors claimed him to be, the Ogunwale Empire was about to face a reckoning. And blood, once awakened, demanded justice. By morning, the Ogunwale estate no longer slept. Whispers moved faster than footsteps, sliding through hallways, slipping past doors, curling into corners where servants pretended not to listen. A boy had arrived the night before, a strange boy, brought in by the chief himself. No announcement, no explanation, only the order that he be treated with respect. In a house built on hierarchy, that single instruction unsettled everyone. Kanyin woke to the sound of birds calling from the iroko trees outside his window. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then the weight of silk sheets, the scent of polished wood, and the memory of the old man's haunted eyes returned all at once. His heart began to race. A soft knock came at the door. A woman entered, dressed in a simple wrapper and blouse, her head slightly bowed. "Good morning, young master," she said gently. The words startled him. "Please don't call me that." She smiled sadly. "The house decides names before people do." She led him to the dining hall, a long room with a table that seemed to stretch endlessly. At the far end sat Chief Ogunwale, already dressed in white traditional attire, his walking stick resting beside him like a silent witness. "Sit," Chief Ogunwale said. As Kanyin ate, the old man studied him openly now. There was no doubt left in his eyes, only fear of what confirmation would bring. Before either could speak, heels clicked against the marble floor. Mrs. Funke Adebayo, the chief's daughter, entered the room. She was elegant in a way that came from privilege sharpened by ambition. Gold bracelets glinted on her wrist, her gaze was sharp enough to cut through lies. She stopped the moment she saw Kanyin. "Who is this?" she demanded. Chief Ogunwale did not flinch. "Sit down, Funke." Her eyes narrowed. "Father, sit." She obeyed, though tension coiled through her body like a snake ready to strike. "This is Kanyin," the chief said carefully. "He may be your nephew." Silence fell, thick, suffocating. Funke laughed once sharply. "Nephew? From where? Father, you are not serious." Kanyin's feet crawled up his neck. He wanted to disappear. "I am very serious," the chief replied. "I believe he is Olumide's son." The name hit the room like thunder. Funke stood abruptly. "That woman, that village girl who disgraced our family." "She was never a disgrace. Our pride was." Funke's gaze flicked to Kanyin, cold and calculating. In that instant, he understood something instinctively. She was not shocked by his presence, she was threatened by it. "You bring a stranger into this house and call him blood? Do you know what this will do to the family name, to the company?" "The truth does not destroy, lies do." Funke smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Then let the truth be tested." That afternoon, arrangements were made for a DNA test. As blood was drawn, Kanyin felt a strange calm. His grandmother's voice echoed in his mind. "When truth rises, those who fed on darkness will panic." From the balcony above, Funke watched the boy walk away, and in her heart, a dangerous decision took shape. Because if Kanyin truly belonged to the Ogunwale bloodline, everything she had spent her life securing could slip from her grasp, and she would not allow that, no matter the cost. The hospital was quiet in the way places of truth often are, sterile, hushed, and heavy with unspoken fears. Kanyin sat on the edge of a vinyl chair, his feet barely touching the floor. The white walls felt colder than the bridge he once slept under. For the first time since arriving at the Ogunwale estate, doubt crept into his heart. What if the dreams meant nothing? What if he truly belonged nowhere? Across the room, Chief Adeyemi Ogunwale stared at the floor, his walking stick clenched tightly in his hand. He had faced hostile boardrooms, political threats, and ruthless competitors without blinking. Yet this, he frightened. Because confirmation would not just restore a lost bloodline, it would reopen a wound he had sealed with silence and wealth. When the doctor finally entered, Funke was already there, seated with practiced calm. Her makeup was flawless, her posture composed, but her fingers tapped against her handbag, betraying her nerves. "Chief Adeyemi," the doctor said respectfully, "the results are ready." The air thickened. Kanyin felt his chest tighten as the doctor unfolded the file. He did not understand the scientific terms, the percentages, the technical language, but he understood the pause. He understood the weight of what was about to be said. "The probability of paternity between the late Olumide Ogunwale and the boy known as Kanyin Morunke is 99.98%. Time stopped. Chief Ogunwale closed his eyes. A deep, broken sound escaped his throat. Not quite a sob, not quite a laugh. Tears rolled freely down his weathered face as he stood and walked towards Kanyin. "My grandson, my blood," he whispered. Kanyin did not move. The words felt too large, too unreal. He had survived his entire life believing he was forgotten by the world. Now the world was kneeling before him. Funke stood abruptly. "This is impossible," she said sharply. "Tests can be manipulated." The doctor stiffened. "Madam, this lab's integrity." "Enough," the chief thundered. His voice carried a strength that shook the room. "You will not insult truth simply because it inconveniences you." Funke's eyes flashed with anger and something darker. As they left the hospital, reporters were already gathering outside. Somehow the news had leaked. The Ogunwale name drew attention like fire drew moths. That evening, the chief announced a private family meeting. I will formally acknowledge Kanyin as my grandson. He will be educated, protected, and prepared." Funke said nothing. She smiled, she nodded, but in her mind she was already planning. Because blood might not lie, but people did. That night, Kanyin stood by the window of his new room, staring at the moon. It was full, just like the one his grandmother said marked his birth. "Grandmother," he whispered, "they know now." The wind stirred the curtains gently, as if answering. Far away, Funke made a phone call, and with that call, the ancestors sensed a disturbance. Because when stolen destiny is reclaimed, those who built their power on exclusion often choose destruction over humility, and the war for Kanyin's future had just begun. The night after the announcement felt heavier than all the nights Kanyin had spent beneath the bridge. Sleep refused to come. The walls of the mansion, once awe-inspiring, now seemed to press inward, as though the house itself was watching him. He sensed it in the air, the shift. Wealth did not erase danger, it only disguised it behind smiles and silk. At exactly midnight, Kanyin heard footsteps outside his door. Soft, careful. He sat up slowly, his grandmother's instincts alive in him. "When silence changes its rhythm, listen," she used to say. The door creaked open. A woman entered, carrying a tray. The dim light revealed her face, one of the housemaids, her head lowered respectfully. "Your medicine," she said. "Chief asked that you take it before sleep."
Blood ran
Kanyin
cold.
frowned.
Across the estate, Funke sat in her private study, phone pressed to her ear. "Did she do it?" she asked calmly. A voice answered nervously. "He didn't drink it, madam." Funke's jaw tightened. "Then we escalate." She ended the call and stared at a framed photograph on her desk, herself, her father, and the Ogunwale board members. Power had been her inheritance, control her religion. She had not clawed her way to the top to lose everything to a boy who smelled of poverty and destiny. "No one steals my future," she whispered. The next morning, Chief Ogunwale collapsed during breakfast. Panic erupted. Doctors were summoned, staff ran. Kanyin watched helplessly as the old man was rushed to the hospital, an oxygen mask covering his face. As the car sped away, Kanyin felt it again, that invisible thread tightening around his heart. This was not coincidence. At the hospital, the diagnosis came swiftly. Poison. A slow-acting toxin administered in small doses over time. Funke gasped convincingly. Who would do such a thing? But Kanyin saw her eyes. They were not afraid. They were calculating. That night, as Chief Ogunwale lay unconscious, Kanyin stood alone by the hospital window. For the first time in his life, he understood something terrifying. Being found did not mean being safe, and legacy, true legacy, was not inherited peacefully. It was fought for. Somewhere beyond the city lights, the ancestors stirred again, because blood had been spilled, and blood always demanded balance. The elders arrived before dawn. They did not come in black vehicles or announce themselves to security. They walked through the gates of the Ogunwale estate as though the walls had always known them. 3 men and 1 woman, dressed in earth-colored wrappers, their steps slow but deliberate, their eyes sharp with ancestral memory. No one stopped them. Kanyin felt their presence before he saw them. He had been sitting beside Chief Ogunwale's hospital bed all night, refusing to leave. Machines hummed softly, measuring breath and heartbeat, but Kanyin listened for something else. The rhythm beneath the rhythm. When the room grew suddenly warm, when the air thickened like rain about to fall, he knew. You carry restless blood,
the old woman said from the doorway. Kanyin turned, startled. Security guards stood frozen behind them, as if unsure whether they were allowed to intervene. "Who are you?" Kanyin asked. "We are what remains. We are what your grandmother prayed would find you." She stepped closer, studying his face. Her eyes softened. "You have Morunke's spirit and Ogunwale's fire." Kanyin swallowed. "My grandfather is dying." "Not yet, but death is bargaining." They formed a circle around the bed. The old woman began to hum, a low, vibrating sound that made the machines flicker. Kanyin felt heat spread through his chest like embers being stirred awake. "Blood remembers," the woman said again, "but blood must also choose." She placed her palm over Kanyin's heart. Images flooded him, his grandmother chanting by firelight, Olamide kneeling before his father, Funke standing alone in a dark room, smiling as poison was poured. Kanyin gasped. "I saw her," he whispered. "She is the one." The elders nodded. "Power that is stolen will always try to silence truth. You must decide whether to hide or rise." "How?" Kanyin asked. "I am just a boy." The woman smiled. "So was the first king." They began the ritual. It was not loud or dramatic. No thunder struck. No spirits appeared. Instead, Kanyin felt clarity descend like cool water. Fear loosened its grip. Confusion fell away. When the ritual ended, Chief Ogunwale's heart monitor steadied. The old man breathed deeper. The elders stepped back. "Our work is done," the woman said. "The rest is yours." By morning, Chief Ogunwale opened his eyes. "Kanyin," he whispered. "I am here," the boy replied, his voice steady. The chief's gaze sharpened, as if seeing him anew. "You are not weak. You are dangerous to lies." Outside the room, Funke watched through the glass, and for the first time, fear touched her heart, because the boy beneath the bridge was gone. In his place stood an heir who could see. The Ogunwale estate had never known a morning as tense as this. Sunlight spilled over the manicured lawns, but inside the walls, shadows grew longer with every whispered word. The news of Chief Ogunwale's recovery had spread quickly through the household. The staff moved with forced cheer, concealing curiosity and fear. But Kanyin no longer felt like a guest. He felt like the eye of a storm. Funke, sharp and calculating, sat in the family drawing room, her fingers drumming on the polished mahogany table. She had spent the night planning, retracing every move, calculating every advantage. The poison had failed, but she would not fail. No one could take what she had built without consequences. Kanyin entered the room. His posture was straight, shoulders squared. The elder's ritual had not just calmed him, it had awakened something primal, something his grandmother had always told him lived in his blood. "Good morning," he said softly. Funke's smile was thin. "Morning, or should I say, Your Highness," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Are you here to claim the empire?" Kanyin did not respond immediately. He looked at her carefully. He had no desire to fight blindly. He knew that patience would serve him better than haste. "I am not here to claim anything yet, but I am here to protect what is mine, what was stolen." The tension in the room shifted. Even the house seemed to listen. Funke stood abruptly. "Stolen? Do you think you can just walk in here and claim a name, a fortune, a life that you know nothing about?" Her voice cracked slightly, betraying the cracks in her facade. Kanyin's gaze remained steady. "I know enough. I know my father's blood runs through me, and I know the ancestors do not forget." Chief Ogunwale, now seated in his recovery chair, looked between them. His voice was weak but firm. "Enough, Funke. This boy is your blood too. Denying him is denying your own lineage." Funke's hands tightened into fists. "You do not understand, Father. You think you can simply fix decades of shame with a few words?" "You cannot silence truth with fear," Kanyin replied, his voice gaining strength. "I have walked through bridges of shame and survived. I will not be silenced now." A hush fell. The staff peeked nervously around corners, unsure whether to intervene or flee. Funke's eyes burned, not just with anger, but with the realization that the careful empire she had maintained for years could unravel in hours. "You speak boldly," she said finally, "but boldness alone cannot protect you." "No," Kanyin agreed, "but wisdom and patience can, and I have both." For the first time, Funke's mask faltered. She realized that the boy she had underestimated was no longer the scared child who had lived beneath a bridge. He had inherited not just blood, but a force that could topple schemes, uncover lies, and shift the balance of power. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the iroko trees as if the ancestors themselves were affirming the boy's awakening. And in that moment, Kanyin understood something essential. Confrontation was inevitable. Betrayal was already in motion, but it would meet a force far older and stronger than ambition alone. Because blood does not lie, and destiny, once awakened, cannot be bargained with. Night descended over the Ogunwale estate with a hush that was both unnatural and foreboding. The grand walls, which had always offered comfort and security, now seemed to loom like silent judges. Kanyin sat by the balcony of his room, the moonlight casting a silver sheen over his face. His mind replayed every word spoken by Funke earlier, every glance that betrayed her ambition and simmering malice. He had survived the streets, the hunger, and the shadows beneath the bridge.
Kanyin demanded, his voice low but firm. The man hesitated. I was told to... To what? Kanyin pressed, tightening his grip. "Leave him alone," the man stammered, fear overtaking whatever loyalty had been instilled in him. "I'm just the messenger." Kanyin ripped the note from the man's pocket. The words scrawled in a familiar hand sent a chill down his spine. "The boy must not inherit. He must disappear. F. Funke." Kenyin's blood boiled, but he kept his composure. He had survived far worse than poison and betrayal. He released the man and let him flee, his mind already racing. The encounter confirmed what he feared. Funke was willing to kill to protect her grip on the empire. And now Kanyin understood fully. Survival alone would not be enough. He needed strategy, allies, and the cunning of the very ancestors who had watched over him since birth. The next morning, Chief Ogunwale woke fully. His recovery had been miraculous, though he was unaware of the night's attempt on Kanyin. The boy kept the knowledge to himself, letting the old man believe he had simply had a restless night. But Kanyin had already begun assembling his own inner circle. Trusted staff who had been loyal to the chief for decades, once overlooked by Funke, now became his allies. He discovered that loyalty could be bought not with money, but with truth, respect, and integrity, a lesson his grandmother had drilled into him. He also began to train in the old ways, using lessons from the elders, subtle gestures, observation, reading people, and understanding motives. He realized that power was not just in blood, it was in knowing when and how to act. By nightfall, Kanyin stood on the balcony once more, looking out at the estate that had once seemed like a gilded cage.
Now he saw it as a chessboard, and every move, every whisper, every shadow could be anticipated. Because Funke's first strike had failed, but the war was far from over. The ancestors whispered in the wind, "The boy is ready, let the shadows come." The estate had grown quiet again, but silence in the Ogunwale household no longer signaled peace, it signaled opportunity. Every servant, every guard, every hidden corner was now a potential ally or threat. Kanyin understood that Funke would strike again, smarter this time, leaving nothing to chance, and he intended to be ready. He began his first strategic move that morning. Using the boy he had once been, the observant, streetwise Kanyin, he started gathering information. Conversations were subtle, glimpses into rooms, watching the patterns of servants, the timing of visitors, and even the slightest gestures of his enemies. Funke's smile, he noticed, often flickered when she thought no one was watching. Her ambition was her weakness, it left traces, and Kanyin learned to read them like open letters. By afternoon, he had discovered the source of Funke's handy help, the same man who had tried to poison him the night before. He traced it back to a small, anonymous company Funke had quietly set up months ago. The name itself was meaningless, a veil over her intentions, but it revealed her methodology: control from the shadows, influence through fear. Kanyin smiled faintly. For the first time, he felt the power that came with knowing more than your opponent, and now it was time to act. That evening, during a formal dinner arranged by Chief Ogunwale to celebrate his recovery, Kanyin carefully maneuvered the conversation toward the family's corporate affairs. Funke sat at the head of the table, exuding confidence, though every glance she cast toward Kanyin was sharp and calculating. "You've been absent from these discussions for too long," Kanyin said calmly, addressing Funke but speaking loudly enough for the whole room to hear. "I assume your strategies to control the empire have been flawless?" Funke's lips tightened. "And what would you know of strategy, boy who lived beneath a bridge?" she spat. The room grew tense. Chief Ogunwale's hand trembled on the table, but he did not intervene. Kanyin continued unshaken. "I know more than enough," he said. "I know about the recent contracts, the shady deals, and the attempts to sabotage my family. I know who sent the messenger last night, and I know that loyalty is something you cannot buy with fear." Gasps filled the room. Funke's composure faltered for a fraction of a second, a crack that was not gone unnoticed. You cannot accuse me without proof," she hissed, her hands trembling slightly. Kanyin held up the note he had intercepted the night before. "This is proof," he said, "signed by you in your own hand." The room went silent. Servants who had feared punishment now looked with awe at the boy. Chief Ogunwale's eyes widened in shock and a flicker of pride. Funke's face flushed crimson, then paled. She realized that her game had been uncovered, but pride would not allow her to surrender. She stood abruptly, voice sharp as steel. "You may have found this note, but you are still a child. You do not know the consequences of your actions. You think your bloodline gives you strength? Strength is earned, boy, and I will make sure you learn that the hard way." Kanyin met her gaze evenly. "Then let it be a fair game, but remember this, I have survived worse than you can imagine, and now I have allies, knowledge, and truth on my side. Your shadows cannot reach me here." Funke's fists clenched. For the first time, she understood that Kanyin was no longer a boy beneath a bridge. He was a force, a storm clothed in the guise of youth, guided by ancestral wisdom and protected by the very blood she sought to erase. The game of shadows had begun, and in this mansion, in this empire built on secrets and ambition, no one would walk away unscathed. Outside, the moonlight shimmered over the estate, whispering promises of battles yet to come. The boy beneath the bridge was gone. In his place stood a grandson, an heir, and a strategist whose power had only begun to awaken. The morning after the dinner confrontation, Kanyin awoke with a new sense of purpose. The night had been long and restless, but the elder's words reverberated in his mind. Blood remembers, but blood must also choose. He realized that survival alone was no longer enough. It was time to assert himself, to strike, not with violence, but with cunning that would expose Funke and protect the legacy that was rightfully his. By mid-morning, Kanyin had called a discreet meeting with trusted staff who had long served the Ogunwale estate, loyalists who remembered Olamide and respected Chief Ogunwale. He spoke softly but firmly, outlining a plan to reveal Funke's manipulations to the wider board, ensuring that her influence would not go unchecked. "You will not listen unless you present evidence they cannot ignore," he said. "We need proof of her schemes, emails, contracts, and witnesses. Everything she thought hidden must be visible." The staff nodded, impressed by his composure. This was the same boy who had survived the streets, but now he was executing strategy in a world where cunning often mattered more than brute strength. By afternoon, Kanyin had begun gathering documents from Funke's private office, using the knowledge of timing, security, and loyalty he had acquired over the past days. He moved with stealth, his small frame unnoticed by those who underestimated him. Hidden in a drawer, he discovered spreadsheets and notes detailing attempted bribes, secretive contracts, and even coded messages arranging the poison attack. The evidence was overwhelming. He paused, feeling the weight of the discovery. Funke had truly been willing to kill to secure her position. The anger that rose within him was tempered by patience. His grandmother had taught him that haste destroys even the best of plans. That evening, Kanyin presented the findings to Chief Ogunwale. The old man's hands trembled as he flipped through the documents. His face paled, and tears pricked the corners of his eyes. "Why? Why would she do this?" the chief whispered, his voice breaking. "Because power blinds some people, grandfather," Kanyin replied. "She thought I was weak. She thought blood beneath the bridge could be ignored." Chief Ogunwale placed a hand on Kanyin's shoulder. "You have the strength of your father and the wisdom of your grandmother. You've done what I feared none could." Kanyin nodded. "The time of waiting is over. Now we act." The next morning, Kanyin called a formal board meeting inviting every key figure in the Ogunwale Empire. Funke arrived, confident and composed, unaware that Kanyin had already secured the room and prepared a meticulous presentation. When the meeting began, Kanyin spoke clearly and without hesitation. He detailed Funke's manipulations, her attempts to sabotage the family, and her involvement in the poisoning attempt. Each revelation was accompanied by proof, emails, contracts, witness testimonies, and even the note from the previous night. Gasps filled the boardroom, murmurs rippled through the staff. Funke's face flushed crimson, then white, as her composure began to crack.
Steady and unwavering. The empire will not be held hostage by ambition or fear. It belongs to the blood that sustains it and to the truth that protects it. Justice will guide us, not deceit. Chief Ogunwale rose, his voice carrying authority that silenced the room. "Funke, you will step down immediately from all positions of authority. Any further actions against my grandson or this family will be met with consequences." Funke's eyes burned with fury, but she realized she was outmaneuvered. The evidence was undeniable, the alliances secured, and Kanyin's strategy flawless. She had underestimated him, a grave mistake that could no longer be forgiven. As the meeting adjourned, Kanyin felt a strange calm. This was his first strike, his initial victory in a battle that would stretch across the empire. Yet he knew Funke would not surrender quietly.
From the shadows, new threats were already forming, and Kanyon's journey was only beginning. Outside the tall windows of the boardroom, the sun set over the estate, painting the horizon in shades of gold. For the first time, Kanyin felt the weight of destiny shift in his favor, and the promise of power tempered by wisdom pulsed through his veins. Funke did not retreat. She could never do that. Power had been her inheritance, ambition her religion, and Kanyon's exposure of her schemes had ignited a fury that demanded action. Behind the mansion's polished walls, she gathered her allies, board members, distant relatives, and even external contractors who had long waited for an opportunity to claim a share of the empire. Kanyin, however, had anticipated her reaction. The elder's words haunted him. Blood remembers, but cunning guides the path. He understood that Funke's retaliation would not come openly. She would strike from the shadows, where fear and uncertainty could be wielded as weapons. The first move came at night. A call from the estate's surveillance alerted Kanyin that the generator powering the estate's surveillance had been sabotaged. Lights flickered, gates refused to open, and alarms failed. Someone wanted darkness, physical and symbolic, to unsettle him. Kanyin remained calm. He had walked beneath bridges in the dead of night, survived hunger, rain, and human cruelty. Flickering lights and broken machinery were minor obstacles. He moved quickly, calling loyal staff and personally inspecting every entrance. Within an hour, backup generators were online and the estate's security systems restored. But the incident confirmed his suspicion. Funke was relentless. Her reach extended beyond the household, and her ambition would allow no mistake. The next day, Kanyin escalated his own measures. He convened a meeting with trusted advisors from the board, including those who had long been skeptical of Funke's decisions. In private, he presented a detailed plan. 1. Strengthen security around Chief Ogunwale and the family. 2. Audit all company accounts and contracts for any hidden manipulations. 3. Monitor communications and suspicious behavior among staff and board members. 4. Publicly acknowledge Kanyin as the rightful heir in the company's internal and external communications. The board agreed, impressed by his strategic foresight and courage. Kanyin had turned vulnerability into power. Meanwhile, Funke made her own preparations. She discreetly contacted a former associate of Olumide who held grudges against the family. She offered a deal: remove Kanyin, and her assistance and the fortune he could influence would be hers. She played on anger, greed, and revenge. Kanyin, sensing the winds of betrayal, anticipated this as well. Using intelligence gathered through loyal staff and careful observation, he intercepted communications and traced the associates' movements. Before Funke's plan could materialize, Kanyin confronted the man with undeniable evidence that the plot was known. Fear overrode greed, and the man abandoned his allegiance to Funke. The first retaliation had been neutralized, but Kanyin knew the war was far from over. Funke's reach, cunning, and desperation meant she would escalate, using any tactic: poison, sabotage, legal maneuvers, or manipulation to remove him. That evening, as the estate settled into an uneasy calm, Kanyin stood on the balcony of the estate, gazing at the city below. He thought of his grandmother and the elders, of bridges and shelters, and of the boy who had survived everything to reach this point. He smiled faintly. They underestimated me once. They will not do it again. And with that, he prepared for the inevitable confrontation that would determine not just his future, but the legacy of the Ogunwale name itself. Days passed with a fragile calm over the Ogunwale estate. Kanyin had strengthened alliances, shored up defenses, and anticipated every minor strike Funke could attempt. Yet beneath the surface, he sensed a storm brewing. Funke was not the type to accept defeat quietly. Her pride, her ambition, and her sense of entitlement would drive her to extremes. That night, she struck boldly. The attack was not subtle. It began with a carefully timed leak to the press, exposing confidential company information and hinting at corruption within the Ogunwale Empire. The headlines screamed accusations of mismanagement, bribery, and insider manipulation, crafted to tarnish the family's image and destabilize the board. But Funke did not stop there. Under the cover of media chaos, she attempted to isolate Kanyin. Meetings were called without his knowledge, key advisors were subtly reassigned, and unfamiliar faces appeared in critical positions, all orchestrated to undermine his influence. Kanyin, however, had anticipated this. Drawing on lessons from the elders, he remained calm, observing patterns, noting inconsistencies, and quietly maintaining lines of communication with loyal staff. He understood that Funke's audacious move was a double-edged sword. Her attack revealed her strategy, leaving traces he could exploit. He called a private meeting with the chief, presenting a detailed counter-strategy. "We will not respond with emotion," Kanyin said. "We respond with precision. Every lie, every misstep, every breach will be documented and addressed. Funke has overextended herself." Chief Ogunwale nodded, a mixture of awe and pride in his eyes. "You have the mind of Olumide and the spirit of your grandmother. This is beyond what I could have imagined." The next day, Kanyin began his counterstrike. He compiled a dossier containing indisputable evidence of Funke's schemes, the poisoning attempt, attempts to manipulate company assets, and direct orders to sabotage internal operations. He presented it to the board in a calm, composed manner, leaving no room for ambiguity. Funke arrived at the meeting confident, her presence commanding. She expected confrontation, but not exposure. As Kanyin revealed each piece of evidence, the room shifted. Gasps echoed, faces turned pale. Funke's composure began to fracture. This is impossible," she exclaimed, realizing her plan had been anticipated. "How did you know?" "I watched, I listened, I learned," Kanyin replied evenly. "You underestimated the blood that runs through me. You underestimated the lessons passed down from my grandmother, from the elders, from every hardship I endured. This empire is not yours to manipulate." The board voted unanimously to remove Funke from all positions of power within the company, citing her actions as breaches of trust, ethics, and legality. Legal consequences would follow, but for now, her influence was nullified. Funke's eyes burned with fury, but there was no room for further argument. Kanyin had won, but the victory was measured. He knew the battle for control and legacy was ongoing. Funke's ambition would not vanish. It had been carved into her nature. That night, Kanyin stood alone in the garden of the estate. The moon shone above, silver and constant, as if confirming the truth of the elder's words. Blood remembers, destiny cannot be stolen, and courage coupled with wisdom is unstoppable. For the first time, he felt the full weight of his inheritance, not just wealth, power, or name, but responsibility. And he understood that every move he made now would shape not only his life, but the legacy of the Ogunwale family for generations to come. The boy beneath the bridge was gone. In his place stood a young man tempered by hardship.
Meetings, once dominated by whispers and hidden agendas, became forums of transparency.
Kanyin introduced policies to prevent future manipulation, auditing every division and placing loyal yet competent advisors in key roles. He emphasized accountability, integrity, and long-term vision. The employees, many of whom had felt stifled under Funke's subtle tyranny, responded with renewed commitment. But it was not just about the empire, it was about healing the family. Kanyin spent long hours with his grandfather, listening to stories of Olumide, of family mistakes, and of sacrifices made in the name of pride. The old man, once consumed by regret and loss, began to see hope in Kanyin's presence, a bridge between past mistakes and future promise. "Blood remembers," Chief Ogunwale said one evening as they walked through the estate's gardens. "But you, Kanyin, have shown it can also guide. You've turned survival into wisdom, fear into courage, and hardship into strength. You are not just my grandson, you are the future." Kanyin nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle comfortably on his shoulders. "I learned from the streets, grandfather," he said, "but I also learned from those who loved me when the world abandoned me. Every lesson has prepared me for this." Even Funke, now stripped of power, remained a lingering shadow. Kanyin understood that ambition like hers does not simply vanish, it transforms into caution, envy, or revenge. But he did not fear her. He had learned that true strength lay not in confrontation alone, but in foresight, preparation, and moral clarity. In the weeks that followed, Kanyin implemented initiatives that transformed the empire. Investments that Funke had handled recklessly were restructured, charitable foundations were revitalized, education programs for underprivileged youth, an idea inspired by his own experience beneath the bridge, were launched. The empire became not just a financial powerhouse, but a force for social good, bridging wealth and purpose. One evening, as he stood on the balcony overlooking the city, Kanyin felt a whisper of wind, soft, deliberate, and familiar. It carried the essence of his grandmother's voice. "You have reclaimed more than a name, Kanyin. You have reclaimed destiny." Tears formed in his eyes, not of sorrow, but of profound gratitude. The boy who had survived bridges, hunger, and abandonment now stood at the pinnacle of power, tempered by wisdom and guided by justice. And yet he knew the journey was not over. Every victory demanded vigilance. Every empire invited ambition. Every family carried its shadows. But for the first time, Kanyin was ready. He had survived the world, he had survived betrayal, and now he would thrive, not just for himself, but for every life touched by his bloodline, every story left unfinished, and every dream whispered under the bridge. The city lights shimmered below, alive and endless. Kanyin smiled. The legacy of Ogunwale was no longer defined by fear or secrecy. It was defined by courage, wisdom, and the relentless truth of blood. And for Kanyin, that was enough. The morning of Kanyin's final test dawned crisp and golden, spilling light across the Ogunwale estate. It was a day unlike any other, a day when the past, present, and future would converge. The empire was thriving, Funke had been neutralized, and loyal allies surrounded him. Yet Kanyin sensed a challenge remained, one that was not external, but deeply personal. It came in the form of a letter delivered by an anonymous messenger. No signature, no name, only a single sentence scrawled in elegant handwriting. "If you wish to claim true legacy, you must face the fire of your own heart." Kanyin read the words and smiled faintly. He had faced hunger, betrayal, poison, and ambition, but the fire within himself, that was the final trial. The elders arrived once more, moving silently through the gardens. Their eyes glimmered with recognition and expectation. The eldest woman spoke first. Blood remembers, but courage chooses. To lead, you must face not only those who oppose you, but the shadows within yourself. Power without wisdom consumes, ambition without morality destroys. Kanyin nodded. He understood. For years he had let instinct and survival guide him. Now wisdom and purpose must lead. The first trial took him to the city streets, far from the estate. He walked through the neighborhoods where he had once lived, observing the lives of those who struggled daily. He saw children begging, parents exhausted, and dreams deferred. He realized that true legacy was not the empire, the wealth, or even the family name. It was the impact he could leave on the lives of others. Returning to the estate, he convened a council, not just of family and board members, but of community leaders, educators, and youth representatives. Together, they outlined initiatives to strengthen the city, expand opportunities, and honor the ancestors' guidance. Kanyin listened more than he spoke, valuing insight and perspective over power and ego. That evening, a symbolic ceremony was held in the main hall of the estate. The elders placed their hands on Kanyin's shoulders. "You have walked through shadow and fire," the eldest man said. "You have claimed not only your bloodline, but your heart. The empire belongs to you, but more importantly, your legacy belongs to those you choose to uplift." Kanyin looked around the hall. He saw Chief Ogunwale, proud and tearful, the loyal staff, relieved and devoted, and even Funke, restrained but observing, perhaps realizing that ambition without morality leads only to ruin. He spoke, his voice calm yet commanding. "I have learned that true power is not in wealth, fear, or even name. It is in courage, wisdom, and service. I will honor my family, my ancestors, and my people. I will protect this legacy not for myself, but for every life it touches, and I will never forget where I came from." The room erupted in quiet affirmation. It was not applause, but a profound recognition of truth, a moment where destiny was realized, not imposed. Outside, the city lights shimmered as if echoing Kanyin's words. The bridges, the shelters, the struggles he had endured, they were all part of a story that now had meaning. The boy who had once been invisible was gone. In his place stood a grandson, a leader, and a guardian of legacy, tempered in fire, guided by blood, and chosen by destiny. Funke, silent, slipped away into the shadows, her ambition intact but tempered by the undeniable truth of Kanyin's rise. The empire and the legacy of the Ogunwale family were safe, not because the boy had survived, but because he had transcended survival. Kanyin stepped onto the balcony of the estate, the moonlight bathing him in silver. The wind whispered through the iroko trees, carrying the voices of ancestors, blessing the boy who had become a man. He closed his eyes, feeling every step of his journey, the hunger, the fear, the betrayal, the triumph, and for the first time he felt complete. Because true legacy, he realized, was forged not in wealth or power, but in courage, wisdom, and the unyielding pursuit of truth. And Kanyin had claimed it forever.